for the last 3 months. My home, the home I had shared with Mark for 20 years, had started to feel less like a sanctuary and more like a stage. Mark had become impossibly distant, but not physically absent. He was constantly checking his phone, always quiet, and he refused to make eye contact. More unsettling was the constant, low-grade feeling of paranoia. Every time I sat on the living room couch, my favorite spot to decompress, I felt a prickle on the back of my neck. If I picked up the phone, he'd walk in seconds later. If I cried, he'd know I was upset without me saying a word. It was a cold, alienating feeling, like a third, invisible person was always in the room, silently judging me. I tried to dismiss it as stress from our failing marriage, but deep down, a little voice whispered, "He is watching you." It wasn't until I reached into the decorative throw pillows on that couch that I finally realized just how right that voice was. The paranoia reached a fever pitch one rainy afternoon. I was folding laundry, but instead of putting it away, I collapsed onto the couch, needing a moment of silence and warmth. The cushions were plump and cozy, but as I adjusted the large, square throw pillow, the one with the stiff, braided decorative piping, my fingers brushed against something hard and unnaturally smooth, embedded right in the seam. It was small, no bigger than a thumbnail, but it didn't belong. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I carefully picked at the piping thread with a nail clipper, my hands trembling. As the thread separated, the tiny, dark object was revealed, a minuscule, polished lens, perfectly aimed at the exact center of the couch. It was a camera. He hadn't just emotionally checked out. He had wired our home to spy on me. The realization was a punch to the gut, a chilling confirmation that the man I slept next to had turned my sanctuary into a surveillance room. I didn't scream. I didn't cry, I just froze, the cushion heavy in my lap. I spent the next terrifying hour meticulously examining the entire couch, the surrounding furniture, and the hidden wiring. The camera was professionally installed, hardwired into the wall behind the couch, feeding a signal somewhere remote. It was the absolute proof of Mark's chilling intent. He wasn't just checking out of the marriage. He was actively gathering evidence against me, hoping to catch me in some vulnerability he could use in a divorce. The initial nausea gave way to an icy clarity. I knew two things. First, confronting him would make him destroy the evidence. He'd deny everything and wipe the feed. Second, this camera was no longer his weapon, it was mine. He thought he had the upper hand by monitoring me. What he didn't realize was that he had just handed me the script, the stage, and the audience himself for the biggest performance of my life. I carefully ray-ducked the camera lens into the piping and settled back onto the couch. But this time, I wasn't relaxing. I was plotting. The rage was hot, but the strategic decision was ice cold. My initial impulse was to tear the couch apart, rip out the camera, and throw it in his face. But the new, tactical me knew better. Confrontation would equal denial. He would claim it was a security measure or simply erase the entire surveillance log. I needed those logs. I needed his panic. I needed to leverage his paranoia. My whole focus shifted. I was going to use his own weapon to make him destroy himself. I decided that for the next few weeks, every action I took on that couch would be a calculated lie. I wasn't just going to live. I was going to perform. I would stage a series of increasingly chaotic, criminal, and financially devastating scenarios, feeding them directly to his hidden feed, turning his surveillance victory into his ultimate downfall. The moment Mark left for his long day at work, likely watching the feed, the theater opened. I sat on the couch, took a deep breath, and mentally transformed into an actress. The plan was not just to confuse him, but to hit him where I knew it would hurt the most. His finances, his sense of control, and his reputation. I started small. I began making frantic, whispered phone calls about liquidity and asset protection. I scattered legal-looking, but completely fake, documents across the coffee table papers with imposing titles like Notice of Pending Seizure and Tax Audit Final Warning. Every time I sat down, I made sure my body language screamed desperate and guilty. The goal was to paint a picture of a woman rapidly spiraling into a legal and financial black hole, a woman he would desperately want to divorce, quickly and quietly before the entire mess landed on his doorstep. I realized the visuals alone weren't enough to convey the gravity of the chaos. Mark wasn't just watching. He needed to be hearing the terrifying details. I spent an afternoon testing the limits of the surveillance system. I carefully spoke at varying volumes on the couch, then checked Mark's laptop, which he often left open but password protected. I needed to know if the camera had an integrated microphone, or if he was running separate audio surveillance. I used a little trick. I sat on the couch and began loudly talking to an imaginary friend about a catastrophic, non-existent plumbing leak in the master bathroom, detailing thousands of dollars in sudden, uninsured water damage. When Mark came home an hour later, he walked straight to the thermostat, complaining the air felt humid, and asked very casually if I had heard any dripping sounds. It was my confirmation. The audio was working perfectly. Now, I could truly stage the sound of his financial ruin. This was the first high-impact scene. I needed to shock him with the sound of financial collapse. I waited until I knew Mark would be at his office, likely glued to the feed. I took my phone, walked into the kitchen to put on a background track of loud, distressed office chatter, and then sat down on the couch, pressing my ear to the receiver. I launched into a hysterical, one-sided phone call, playing the role of a woman in absolute panic. My voice was loud, rugged, and designed to carry right into the hidden microphone. I screamed about a fake business venture that had supposedly imploded, shouting, "You told me it was safe. We lost everything. The entire investment is gone. I'm ruined, we're bankrupt." I emphasized massive, six-figure losses and the impending seizure of our major assets. I even faked a dizzy spell, collapsing dramatically onto the cushion. I knew that sound alone, the sound of his retirement savings being wiped out by my imaginary mistakes, would instantly turn his secret surveillance from satisfying reconnaissance into a crippling nightmare. Financial ruin wasn't enough. I needed to make him fear legal exposure and physical danger. I recruited my friend, David, a man whose voice was naturally deep and gravelly, for the next scene. We agreed on a brief, coded script that implied something highly illegal and serious. I waited until Mark was away on a scheduled overnight trip, knowing he would watch the saved footage immediately upon his return. David called, and I put him on speakerphone, keeping the volume slightly low so Mark would have to strain to hear it. David, using hushed, intense tones, said things like, "The package is secure, but the client is asking too many questions. We need to go dark, and you need to keep that ledger hidden. They know your face now." I responded with panicked affirmations, asking what the fallout would be. I watched the hidden lens, knowing that Mark was now staring at his feed, processing the horrifying possibility. His soon-to-be ex-wife wasn't just broke. She was involved in something criminal that could land him in court, or worse. The panic generated by the criminal entanglement needed a visual follow-up. That evening, I sat on the couch with a battered, old duffel bag. I didn't pack clothes. I packed props. I loudly talked on the phone to my contact, whispering about exit strategies and routes. Then came the visual proof. I pulled out a handful of international currency I'd bought days ago, counting the euro notes conspicuously. I held up an old, expired passport, not mine, talking about how the name change would be tricky. The most alarming part for Mark, watching from his feed, would be my deliberate show of desperation. I looked furtive, stressed, and clearly preparing for a permanent, sudden departure. The message was clear. She's running because the legal consequences are severe. If I ran, Mark would be left behind, holding the bag of all our shared, legal and now fictional illegal liabilities. His only option was now to run himself, or initiate the divorce immediately to separate himself from the fallout. The threat of financial ruin and criminal exposure might make Mark want to leave, but I needed a final, repulsive reason for him to want to sever all ties immediately, a health crisis. I used subtle stage makeup to give my face a pale, sickly look, and messed my hair to appear distressed. I sat on the couch with a box of tissues, performing a dramatic, labored coughing fit directly into the microphone. I then opened a large binder labeled with a famous hospital logo printed from a template and began reading aloud, quietly weeping, details about a stage for diagnosis and discussing the catastrophic, uninsured costs of the fictional treatment plan. I even Googled expensive cancer medications and whispered the names into the phone, claiming I was trying to find out-of-pocket costs. Mark, watching the scene, wouldn't just see a woman collapsing financially and legally. He would see a massive, terminal liability that would destroy his future savings and leave him facing endless, messy medical debts. The biggest threat to Mark wasn't my imaginary debt, but the possibility that my chaos would lead authorities straight to his clean assets. I set up the scene perfectly. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to be talking to a new, highly specialized divorce lawyer, a voice Mark wouldn't recognize. I was discussing the fictional tax audit and the supposed criminal investigation. At the peak of the conversation, I deliberately let the phone slip from my hand and accidentally activated the speakerphone function. The microphone picked up the supposed lawyer's voice loud and clear, saying the key line, "We need to move fast. If the audit confirms the fraud, they will seek a court order to seize all marital assets, including your husband's brokerage accounts, as collateral." I quickly grabbed the phone and ended the call, looking utterly devastated by the accidental leak of information. This single scene would confirm Mark's worst fear. His own careful nest egg was now collateral damage in my escalating, messy disaster. After a solid week of staged phone calls, feigned illnesses, and whispers of warrants, I needed a period of silence to let the terror sink in. Mark, I knew, was expecting the hammer to drop. I deliberately left the house, taking only what I absolutely needed, and stayed at a friend's house for 48 hours. Before leaving, I left an ominous, handwritten note conspicuously placed on the coffee table, visible to the camera lens. It read, in shaky script, "Had to go dark. The heat is on. We'll contact you when it's safe." For 2 full days, the camera feed would show an empty couch, an undisturbed note, and total silence. Mark, glued to his screen, would be facing the terrifying void of the unknown. Where was I? Had I fled the country? Had I been arrested? Was he next? The silence, after all the chaos, was the most psychologically punishing move of all, pushing his anxiety to a volatile, decision-making breaking point. I returned late on the second night, intentionally looking exhausted and disheveled. I didn't acknowledge the camera immediately. I simply walked into the living room, picked up the ominous note, and crumpled it slowly. I sat down on the couch, not with panic, but with grim exhaustion. I poured myself a glass of water, took a long, shaky drink, and muttered to myself, loud enough for the microphone, "I handled it. It's safe for now, but the damage is done. There's no coming back from this." I was sending messages to Mark. 1, the immediate danger has passed, but 2, the underlying chaos, the tax audit, the criminal entanglement, The terminal illness is now permanent. I was giving him a moment of false relief, allowing his stress hormones to subside just enough so he could start making rational, but predictable exit plans. I knew that after 2 days of thinking he was financially ruined and potentially liable for felonies, his priority would be one thing: saving himself. My quiet return confirmed what I had hoped. Mark was unraveling. He was trying to plan his immediate, secret escape. He became incredibly careless. The same day I returned, I found a handwritten checklist hidden under a stack of old bills in his office drawer. It was hastily scrawled: transfer brokerage to Cayman account. Book one-way flight Phoenix. Dallas, contact divorce lawyer private, quiet, sell boat. But the real jackpot was on the kitchen counter. He had left his new burner phone charging, and when I picked it up, it was unlocked. There was one unsent text to an unfamiliar number detailing a large, imminent wire transfer and the instruction: keep this quiet. Leaving end of month. I didn't need any more evidence. My staged chaos, the tax audit, the criminal threat, the health crisis had worked flawlessly. He wasn't planning a confrontation. He was planning a cowardly vanishing act, confirming his total lack of loyalty and his guilt. The time for acting was over. The time for documentation had arrived. I had all the indirect evidence: his checklist, his text messages. But I needed the smoking gun, the illegal surveillance itself. I waited until he was out. Then, working quickly and precisely, I carefully cut the thread holding the hidden camera in the cushion. I documented every step with my own phone: a close-up photo of the tiny lens, photos of the wiring hidden in the couch frame, and a video of me removing the camera entirely. This was the proof of his invasion of privacy, the evidence that would invalidate any claim he made about my financial negligence and expose his own calculated deceit. I sealed the camera, the checklist, and the screenshots of his burner phone texts in a folder labeled divorce evidence. Do not lose. I was walking into the lawyer's office armed not with emotion, but with irrefutable, physical proof that Mark was a panicked liar who had committed an illegal act to orchestrate a selfish exit. I replaced the note I had left for my vanishing act with a new one. I took the small, metallic body of the spy camera, still slightly dusty from its hiding spot, and placed it right in the center of the coffee table, aimed directly at the now empty space in the couch cushion where it had been surgically removed. Next to the camera, I placed a clean, typed note. It read simply: Mark, the show is over. Meet me and my lawyer tomorrow at 9 a.m. We need to discuss the future of your assets and my privacy. Don't be late. I knew the moment he opened the surveillance fee door, more likely saw the note in person when he got home, his heart would stop. The panic he had endured for a month would suddenly morph into crippling dread. He would realize his paranoia was entirely misplaced, and his weapon had been turned against him by a wife far smarter than he ever gave her credit for. Mark walked into the lawyer's office looking haggard, defensive, and ready to fight about money and asset division. He was probably planning to use some vague accusations about my financial carelessness, the chaos I had staged as leverage. He sat across the table, rigid with anxiety. I let my lawyer do the talking first, calmly introducing the topic of his secret attempt to flee the state and hide assets. Mark scoffed, starting his denial. That is absolutely absurd. She's clearly unstable. That's when I spoke, cutting him off with cold finality. I slid the evidence folder across the table, stopping directly in front of him. No, Mark. The absurd part is that you thought I wouldn't find your camera. The air went silent. My lawyer presented the folder, which contained the photographs of the hidden wiring, the removed spy camera, and Mark's own flight and asset transfer checklists. Mark's face drained of color. His whole elaborate defense collapsed instantly. He realized that for the last month, He hadn't been monitoring me. He had been recording his own humiliation and sealing his own legal fate. My lawyer leaned across the table, his tone authoritative. Mark, surveillance of this nature is a serious violation of privacy laws, and your subsequent attempts to liquidate and hide marital assets constitute clear financial misconduct. We have documented proof of both. Any claim you intended to make about marital assets being compromised by her actions is irrelevant, because you provided the evidence that your own actions were illegal and predicated on malice. He had no defense. The costs of his paranoia were staggering. Not only did I secure a highly favorable financial settlement, retaining the house and a significant portion of his hidden accounts, but the judge also viewed his actions, the spying and the attempt to flee, as evidence of severe misconduct. I didn't just win a divorce. I won a complete, financially protected exit, all because he was too arrogant to realize his hidden weapon could be turned into my ultimate tool. When I finally returned to the house, Mark was gone. The divorce papers were signed, and the key exchange was completed. I walked into the living room, and my eyes immediately went to the area where the camera had been. The couch, the centerpiece of his deception, and my performance felt contaminated. I called a moving service immediately. I stood and watched as the movers carried the large, heavy sofa out of the house and into the truck. It wasn't until the doorway was clear that I felt the physical tension leave my body. The next day, a beautiful, soft, modern sofa was delivered. It was a clean, light color, placed in a slightly different position, bathed in sunlight. I sat down on it, sinking into the plush cushions. There were no secrets in the piping, no hidden lenses, and no sense of a cold. Silent, I watching my every move. The couch was finally free, and more importantly, I was finally free. Looking back, the emotional pain of the betrayal was immense, but the hidden camera was, ironically, the greatest gift Mark ever gave me. Without it, the divorce would have been a long, drawn-out battle of he said, she said, resulting in an equitable but compromised split. Instead, his arrogance gave me the clarity, the stage, and the perfect weapon. I realized that true strength isn't about confronting the attacker directly. It's about understanding their motivations and using their own tactics against them. Mark wanted to spy on my misery. Instead, he got a front row seat to his own orchestrated downfall. My life now is built on honesty and true peace. I still sit on the couch and relax, but now, the only eyes watching me are my own. I won the house, I won the settlement, but most importantly, I won my dignity. I learned that when someone tries to trap you, sometimes the smartest move is to jump into the trap and take control of the settings. The only thing I look over my shoulder for now is the next opportunity.